So let it burn, everything they swore we'd one day earn. I am the bearer of the burden and the flame. I will break the mountain, I will end the game. Not for glory, not for pride, for the one still standing at my side. Let it burn, let it burn. I'll bear the weight no other man could carry.
I love talking for, what was that, 26 minutes? Wonderful. Oh my goodness. This has just been, it's been one of those times. Well, I appreciate you, Chris, because you pointed out that my microphone was actually on mute. And I've been talking for a good 26 minutes here to nobody. So this one is probably going to get pulled and clipped because I've been talking to myself. But I feel like that's how my day has gone. That's kind of how my day has gone. So I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and start back at the top because, again, I will clip this and we will save myself some sanity and I'll repost it as a video. But I appreciate the people pointing out that I made an oopsie and for 26 minutes I talked to myself on mute. So cool. I'm Jessica Barberi and I'm here talking to myself because I had a scheduling snafu where I was hoping to have join me. They weren't available. So here we are talking to myself. And for, I guess, the reason that I'm by myself, I couldn't hear that I was not talking to anybody and that I was on mute. But yeah, I'm here because I released a book today called Burden of Fire, and that is the third book in my series. And yeah, I was hoping to have somebody come on. They didn't come on, but I'm going to go ahead and hit it from the top. I'll do a quick pitch for what this is. I'm going to actually do it from the perspective of for this book instead of the whole series. So I won't pitch the series. I'll pitch this book as an individual piece of that. And what that would look like is I have Ronan has returned to Dragmare's eastern steppe, and he has a plan to raise up Starka riders of old to end the dragon hunting forever. But he is quickly foiled as the Starka have recently made some significant changes, and that has led to new challenges being presented. He thought it was going to be easy, but, nothing ever is. So with that, we have a story that is going to explore what it will take for him to pivot and see if he can succeed, or will this just be one more failure to add to his long list of failures. So with that, I'm going to go back and I'll say I'm excited to get this book out into the world. This has been one that I've wanted to tell for a while. Since I started the first book of this series and had that one mapped out, I started to think of what was next for this character. And this was actually supposed to be really the second book. It was only supposed to be 2 books and it ended up being 3 just because it took longer to get to this part of the story. I had part of it fleshed out and it's lived in my head now then for at least a good year. And I have been excited to get this finally out there. This one, I finished the second book around the end of December, and then life got crazy. I was very pregnant, and I was very, very busy with work and life and everything else. So things were happening. I was not doing much writing. So most of January and February, I only got 2 chapters done. It was the prologue, which is like 3 pages, so it's not very long, and then chapter 1. And that was basically all I had gotten written. So I was looking forward to my maternity leave as hopefully being a time when I would be able to actually make some writing progress, no other competing work priorities or anything like that. So that was exciting to finally have the baby and then be able to write. Now, for those that don't know, unfortunately, I ended up getting RSV right before I had my baby, and then I was very sick while she was new. I ended up with pneumonia, and for the first 3 weeks with her, things weren't that great, and we spent a lot of time just laying around in bed, so I didn't do a lot of writing there, but once I started to feel better, I just really started to make a lot of progress, and I was cooking at about I would say, like, 2,000 words a day, which for me is somewhere between most of my chapters are around 2 to 3,000 words, so, most of a chapter would have been the progress or pace that I was kind of cooking at. So I got this one out pretty quick. I usually like to write a chapter and then I'll do a thorough edit of that chapter before I move on to the next thing. I did some editing, but not to the same degree. Mostly I wanted to keep that momentum and try and get the whole story written because it's easier to edit something that already exists when you're kind of busy and you have to go back to life than it is to sit down and write the whole chapter. So I did change my approach just to try and get everything written before the end of my maternity leave. So that was my plan with this book, and it worked out. I actually finished the entire thing. I got the last chapter written like I think like a day or two before my maternity leave was officially over. And so that was wonderful. It put me right where I wanted to be. And then I started to go through and again and edit more thoroughly. And it took me some time to get it edited, but um, that was fun. I was glad that I was able to get this done because again, I'm back to being busy and it's hard for me to sit down and write again. And I'm hoping that, as my baby gets older and things kind of chill out from the summer, that I'll maybe have a little more time to work on my next projects. But yeah, it was good to make use of that time. I got very good this time around at narrating or dictating. So I have a little write by voice app on my phone, and the baby wouldn't want to sleep anywhere but like being walked around. So I would tie her onto myself with a baby wrap and I would start walking around either my driveway or down the road, and I would have this app up and you can kind of talk to it, and then I would have like the keyboard open so that I would, it had a hard time with names, the Starka names it does not like. So I had to keep typing in the Starka names or typing in and fixing things as I was going, but it was a efficient way to do that where I could do like a hybrid of talking and texting and get the chapters out. So that allowed me to make a lot more progress on this book than I think I would have otherwise been able to make with a new baby, because there is a point at which those first weeks they're pretty sleepy and they just kind of hang around. But again, I was sick, so I wasn't writing, and the fact that I was able to go ahead and typey type on my phone instead, that was a lot more helpful to making progress and to getting that word count in. It does have a lot more. There are errors that slip by. Again, I was looking at it as I was talking, so it was. I would say it was more. It wasn't a pure dictation. It was like a hybrid approach where I would dictate out a sentence because it's quicker for me to say the sentence than it was for me to type with my thumbs. But I would fix the punctuation and the names and any of the translations that it was getting wrong during that time. But yeah, that was an interesting way. I've gotten a lot better at that, and I actually use that now for a lot more things that I have to write. So if I'm writing a Substack article or if I'm writing things for work, even, I will now use that app and dictate a little bit because it's an efficient way for me to get things done if I'm wanting. I like movement. Movement is fun. So it's helpful to do that, especially again with a baby who prefers to be walking around. She's at that age now that, 4 to 5 months, I always felt like was the hardest time with I have 4 children. So it's been the hardest time with all of my babies because it's like they're awake enough where they don't want to just sleep and they're not happy just being on you and staring at one space. They want to see things and they want to like be stimulated, but they can't actually facilitate that themselves very well. Like they're just starting to be able to grab things, so they're just starting to get like where they can hold a toy, but they're not very good at that, and they can't exactly sit, and they can't like move themselves very much anywhere, so they're they get bored very easy. And so you have to kind of take them all over the place and walk them around and interact with them, and they find that um satisfying. So uh yeah, I got this one done and then got it edited, and I wanted to say, so this one I'm proud of as far as what I've put out there. I have some extra art inside the interior. So I do a chapter icon piece of art for each of the chapters. There's a different icon for each section. This book has 4 sections. It's a little longer than some of my other books. So for icons, I have some art that I commissioned for the climactic chapter. At the end, the prompt for that was Clint Eastwood, but if he was in Gran Torino, Clint Eastwood from Gran Torino specifically, that's important. But if he was a dragon. So I think the artist, John, did a fantastic job bringing that to life. I showed it to my brother. He laughed and said, yeah, he pretty much nailed that one. So I hope you guys get the book, get the ebook. It's in both versions, and you can check out that image because it's pretty cool. I like that, and I was glad I could add that to it. As far as the audiobook version, I like to do audiobook versions. Unfortunately, well, for this one, I'm actually doing like a more of a cast. So I based the Starka's language on Old Norse and broadly Scandinavian constructs and words. So it's similar in those veins. It's similar but different, but I'm drawing whenever I use their language, I'm drawing bits from those languages and kind of hodgepodging them into its own thing. So I wanted Scandinavian actors to be able to do the voices so they stand out from some of the other accents that have had represented or that Chris can do. So I actually have cast an actor who does Listfor and Beardor, the 2 other Starka point of views. I'm still trying to find the right actress for Vayana, the female point of view. I think I have her, but she's on vacation, so I can't confirm until she comes back tomorrow. So hopefully that we'll be able to work that out. And then I have cast several other actors to do bit parts for the Starka. Like I have a lot of Starka characters, so I had to do a lot of different actors to do some variation in the voices, and that's been fun. So I have several of those. I'm going to have to go back through though, and once I get the final recordings, I'll go through. Chris will do some edits on the narration to make sure we have everything's said properly and good quality. And then from there, I'll have to splice in these different bits of dialogue for the Starka. And I hope that's my goal is to have it be a really fun experience, or an immersive kind of more of a theatric type performance type of thing. So it's not just a plain narration, and it's more of a audio drama type of scenario. And I think that will be, I hope that will be enjoyable. I know some people don't like that, but I do, and I'm tailoring it towards what I like, and I want to put on a better production, especially considering that, we're competing against other forms of entertainment, so I want to make it fun and entertaining. But the guy that does Listfor and Beardor, it's the same individual, but he did a great job. He sent over the readings, and I love it. So I'm looking forward to getting that out. That's going to be trailing the ebook. So ebook and print are both out today. I'm giving myself runway with the audio because I know it takes time to get the recordings together. I still don't have the full book actually recorded to even start to splice in things. So I'm expecting that sometime in October. That's my goal target. I'm giving myself all of this month and all of September to get all the rest of the recording pieces finished and finalized and then spliced in. And then I figure by October, I should be able to put that out there. So a 2-month delay, but if that's your format, so I apologize. Uh, Again, I'm about 3 chapters out from having the whole book. Uh, Personal life and summer schedules don't always work. You can't control everything. So we're just working to get that out there, and then it'll be out. But I look forward to doing that. I talked a little bit, so just about this book in particular and the world. I really had a lot of fun with this one because my other stories, a lot you might know if you're familiar with what I've written at all. Uh, my first series was it's more of a medieval fantasy, so pretty standard like European type fantasy environment. And the twist to that was that it was a government system like the Soviet Union or North Korea. So it's kind of a rough thing. And I had that is my, there's a lot of that in the world, right? So when I moved Ronan to this new continent to the east, it starts out very similar in this in the culture, and that's actually a part of his an original story where it's very similar to what he's known. So he kind of overestimates that similarity and how he can behave. But as he moves east, it starts to get the land changes. It starts to get a little more weird, and he at the end of that first book encounters the Starka as this nomadic tribal dragon hunting people. And so it was fun. It's been fun to develop them, and that's one of my favorite parts of this story is the world that I've created or expanded, I guess you would say, because it's still in the same world. But to have this very unique people that I had to come up with wedding rituals, a pantheon of gods, naming rituals, how they do punishments, everything from like how they logistically handle their moves, like what they eat, because they're a pastoral people. They're not like a agricultural, they're not farming things. So they don't have things like bread, like everything is kind of based on their deer and how they eat, like the way that they dress. So they were a fun culture. They're kind of I say it's like if the Sami and the Mongolians had a baby, that's kind of what we have here. It's like a mix of the deer herding and the bright colors with the kind of big open landscapes, these uh, ultra masculine values, but they have a society that's broken into two. It's very caste based, where they have herders and hunters, and there's like they have slurs that they call each other, like they have gestures. So they all wear crowns to indicate their caste. So they are either antler crowns or headdresses or horn headdresses. And the horn, the horns, which signifies that you're of the hunter class, they'll tap their horns whenever they see the herders as an insult to them. So, things like that are fun. And I had to create lore and backstories, so like origin stories of how the dragons were birthed into the mountain and all sorts of fun stuff. And so it was a very rich and fun thing to write because it's very different from that traditional medieval fantasy world. It was very much different than I think even some of the other stuff. Like I'll see fantasy stories that are like set in Asia or even like the Middle East where you have these desert people. But this was different. This is out in this big open grassland at the base of a mountain, and these people are living that kind of life. And it was a lot of fun to develop them and to build them out over the last 2 books. So they're kind of introduced. They're introduced at the end of the first book of this series. They are developed and expanded in the second book. You start to get an idea of like how they handle their widows and like how the herders, you get a perspective from a herder of the hunters, because she was a widow of a hunter's widow who became a herder class woman. So she's got a very particular viewpoint, and there's some tension there. And then you get into this so much more. I have 3 out of 4 of the point of view characters are all Starka people. So you get it from the woman's perspective, you get it from a herder's perspective, and you get it from a hunter's perspective. And all 3 of them, they're very unique in their personality, but there's a richness there where you can really feel this culture. And I like immerse yourself into this world, and I really hope that comes through on the pages, because it was a lot of fun to to build and to think about and to read about different cultures that are real world today to try and get a good idea of how maybe they would have lived or what seems most logical for how they might do different things. So that was a lot of fun. The cool thing about this story is that, I know that there are really two types of authors. I would say they're the kinds that are like ideas pouring out from every pore. They have an endless supply of story ideas, and they what they want. And then there's the people that are like, I have a story idea, and then after that they're like worried about running out of ideas. Like, will I keep writing? Is this going to be the last thing that I pen? Like, I don't know if I have any better ideas. Am I going to come up with something new and exciting? Um, like I said, I knew the shape of this story from the perspective of Ronan and where I wanted him to start and where I wanted him to finish. And I had some elements of how that was going to move throughout the story. But from the perspective of who these people were, the Starka, I didn't really have a good I had to build a lot of that as I was going. And for a while, I'm thinking, once I tell the story, am I going to have another story to tell here? Like, it seems like maybe this world is done and I'm going to have to come up with something new, and I'm going to have to invent a whole new fantasy world. And that's a little overwhelming. I'll be honest, because, it takes a lot to build these, and maybe I'll write something else. I don't know. But I ended up at the end of this story being like, well, shoot, I just kicked the door open and now we got a whole bunch of opportunity here, which I think is fun because you realize I set it up in a way that, like, I have a lot of opportunity to keep telling a story in this world where I don't have to do something new. So that's fun. And that, I guess, brings me to the ending of this. One of the things, this is the second series I've written, and I know one of the things a lot of authors struggle with is this idea of how do you end a story. And you might be like our good friend George, and you just don't end your story. But and I think that there's, to some degree, I've actually encountered people that, like, they maybe started something, but they're nervous of ending it, or they're nervous of putting out the ending because they don't know how it's going to be received. And that was something that I found when I finished my first story, was that it did, like, people were divided over the ending. I thought the ending made perfect sense with what I set up, and it really, to me, it couldn't have gone a different way, which is, my perspective, but other people had other perspectives. So I had people that really loved the ending and thought it was great and it buttoned up, but it seems to divide. Like, I don't have, like, if I look at the ratings on that, it's either a 5 or a 3. So there were people that, like, they enjoyed the series enough to go to the end, but then they were disappointed by the ending enough to kind of rate it lower. Or there were people that were perfectly happy and thought I did a great job. And there was divide. And the main thing that seemed to divide people was that they didn't feel like the ending that I produced was epic enough for what I had built up. And I can understand that, and I have a respect for that position. So that was something that I tried with this book to maybe learn from as a lesson with how I approached the ending of it. I wanted to make sure that the people that got this far in this story, did not walk away from it feeling like it was not epic. So by the end, this thing, once it hits the movement for the final sequence, it moves. It's like chapter after chapter after chapter of all the point of views kind of converging at the same time, and they're all like big epic sequences, one after the other, and it's just kind of bang 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 bang, to the point where it's like you're almost like trying to there's no catching your breath in between as this is happening until the end, where I give 3 or 4 chapters of a breath. Like, it's just kind of like close it out and calm it down and like bring it home. But that what would be like the finale sequence is very much, it moves. So that was, I hope that comes and addresses some of those, that feedback, and maybe people that pick up this book when they get to the ending, or they feel like their pulse is racing, like I was really moving and cooking and telling an epic story in a way that really scratches that itch, while also satisfying those people that liked it when the loose ends tie together and you get this kind of nice bow at the end. So I think I'm hoping it'll appeal to both kinds of readers, and that people receive this ending much better than than the first series that I put out. I'm quite proud of it. I like how it ends, and I feel like it hits the notes from a theme perspective that I wanted to. Um, but yeah, so I've been talking forever. I'm already at my 50 minutes, even though the first half of this was me just talking to myself. But I think with that, I'm not going to belabor this point again. I will pull this off from the lives. I'll take the video and I'm going to edit it and end up putting it back up as a proper video, since I don't need people losing me at the beginning here. So with that, I guess what I want to do is actually go ahead and maybe read a little bit from I'll take chapter 1. I'm going to skip the prologue simply because the prologue actually has a little bit of a spoiler for book 2. So if you have not picked up my series at all and you're kind of going into this raw, I don't want to spoil it per se with the prologue. I'm going to go right into chapter 1 because this gets you into the heart of what the Starka are. And I feel like this is a pretty harsh way to introduce these people and who they are. So I'm going to read the first little part here. Yeah, if I can trim I'll try that, Chris. So Chris is helping me out here with the trim the YouTube. I'll try that. I'm gonna play with it because it's not a good experience. So we'll see what we can come up with. But yeah, I'm going to read this first section of chapter 1. It's not too long, so I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but it is called The New Match. An elderly midwife was kneeling on the deer-clipped grass, her hands raised high above her head as she spoke out to the wind. Vindman, we await your decision. If you determine that his spirit possesses insufficient strength to walk the difficult path alongside our people, then claim him as a tribute to satisfy your endless appetite. We rely upon you to protect our clan, fortify the blood that flows through our veins, and bless our lineage with your power, so that we may survive the infinite trials that lie before us. Spread out on the ground before her was a brightly colored woven blanket, upon which lay the naked body of a squalling newborn boy. Opposite the old midwife, but equally close to the baby, his mother maintained her kneeling vigil. Her expression was frozen like ice, with her eyes pressed closed. Her hands clutched her horn headdress, which rested upon her lap. Her mouth was a thin line that did not move despite the infant's cries. Vayana stood behind her, gray eyes scanning the dark landscape, bouncing between the midwife, mother, babe, and grazing stark deer that surrounded them. Around her stood 3 of her other sisters, who soon resumed their chanting, as together they waited for the wind gods to decide the child's fate. The baby had been born a few hours earlier. He had emerged from the womb, skin tinged blue, completely still and silent. The midwife had succeeded in rubbing life back into him, but the state of his birth was a bad omen, and for it he was now subject to a test by the wind. Vayana shifted as the breeze picked up around her and tickled through a strand of light honey hair that had escaped her braid. The air was cold this night, and after a long birth her eyes were heavy. Regardless, she was required to stand until dawn, or until the baby stilled, as was custom. Together with her sisters, they sang out to the wind, their combined voices carrying off on the breeze out into the steppe, broken only by the words of the old midwife as she once more repeated the prayer for judgment. The mother's lips did not part. Time slid by. The baby's cries weakened to whimpers as his movements grew sluggish. His mother's skirts around her knees had turned red with blood, and the songs from her sister had grown weak with fatigue. Vayana fought back a dizzy, nauseous feeling and forced open her drooping eyes. As dawn approached, the baby let out a final gasp as stillness fell upon him. The women stopped their song as the midwife leaned forward, setting 2 fingers on his bare chest. Her face moved in close to check him. She then reached over, taking hold of the end of the blanket and folding it over the infant's body. The Vindmen have made their decision. The child is now theirs. She spoke to the group before pushing herself up to her feet to face those that had gathered. We will bury him in the morning, she declared, waving the others off. Now go and get some rest. Diana took a deep breath and then followed her sisters forward to lay hands upon the mother and say a blessing before walking off. She glanced over her shoulder only once to catch her sister, still on her knees before the still body of her son. She watched her wrench free a horn from her headdress and then tuck it under the cover with the infant before bowing her head and sinking down towards what remained. That's the end of that section. So that is our Test by the Wind and the introduction to the Starka from chapter 1 there. Pretty brutal way to introduce them. So, again, this series is called Sons of the Flame. It is out now in full, parts 1, 2, and 3, and it chronicles the story of Crown Prince Ronan as he basically takes on his own challenges in the world. So, if you want to find me, aside from this YouTube channel, which I am setting up several more interviews over the next coming weeks, I hope to have, I try for about an interview once a week with different authors who are releasing different books. I try to get, mostly it's been fantasy authors. That's not for not wanting to talk to other folks. I've had a few horror, some historical fiction. I've had a comic book artist, or author, sorry. And so I would love to have different kinds of people. Yes, Chris, as far as, is it the same Ronan? It is the same Ronan from Legacy of Blood. So he carries on in the next 2 books, but he is the main protagonist of this story. So, yeah, let's see. So I'll be here. I'm over on X most active as far as social media, but you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on some other social medias. I think I'm over on, I'm not on TikTok. I don't have a TikTok, but I do have obviously this YouTube channel. I have X, I have Instagram. I pop on Threads occasionally to comment on some stuff. And yeah, so I would say follow me. I encourage you guys to pick this up. This story, so I did mention that it follows from my other series. You do not have to have read the other series to pick this one up. If you want to start with this one, you can start with this one. As far as the story, I would say it will make the most sense if you start at book 1 and you get the at least Ronan's origin story to understand who he is and how he has come to be here. So it is intended to be 1, 2, and 3 that you read in order. But it's been a story that I think of the 2 series, I'm very proud of how this one came out. I feel like I learned a lot as an author. So if you enjoyed the first series, I hope you enjoy this one even more, because I feel like I've done a better job telling the story. So we'll see. That verdict is left to be determined, but I very much enjoyed this story. I am glad it's out into the world. And if you want to invest in a world where you don't have to where somebody puts out a lot of books and you don't have to keep learning new magic systems, I keep publishing more books. I have plans as far as what's next after this. I did mention I want to do a middle grade book. I might have mentioned that when I was on mute, so who knows. But that is my next project, is a middle grade story. It will be set in the same world, a few years after the events of the end of this story. It will be intended to be able to be read by followers of the series. So if you have followed me along, I know that there are people out there who have read every single one of my books. You can read this one. It will not be it's not going to be childish per se. It's more or less tailoring the content. So the protagonist of that book is a 13-year-old boy. And obviously the content will be tailored around his story, which is going to be a little more, it'll be accessible to a younger audience. But it's going to fill in some of the gaps as far as what happens after this story. and you'll get a picture for how the world has changed as a result of what happens at the end of this book. From there, I do have a plan for a couple other things. So there will be I think what I'm going to do is a smaller novella, which will be Kieran and Ronan together. Um, also after the event, so that'll chronologically it will be the middle grade story, then this little novella, and then I have another series in mind. I don't know how many books that's going to be. I have the idea for what the story is going to look like. How long it will take me to tell that story, I don't actually know. We'll find out. But that one will be interesting because I'm going to market that one. I think my plan for that one is a bit more of like, I guess, a romance first kind of mindset. Um, all of my stories eventually get some sort of like, I don't know, little romantic element, but it's usually like the third book. So people are like, I can't really sell it as like, this is a romantasy that you will enjoy. This one will be leading more forward with a romantic element so that I can hopefully grab some of that readership that might like that more that kind of story. But I'm going to market that not as romantasy as much as a fantasy with romance or fantasy romance, because I don't want to turn off the readers of my stuff. If you liked the relationship between Kieran and Roisin, then this would be a perfectly appropriate kind of follow on. The villain for that I actually have already in my head will be the first time that I've written what would be a proper true evil person. Which I have not done before. I've had systems. I tend to gravitate towards the idea of the system is bad, and you're taking down a government or a culture that needs to change. It's a more airy, not specific villain in this new series idea that I'm floating with or I'm in the process of outlining. That will be a more proper actual bad guy that is the target of the need for people to overthrow. So evil figure, an actual bad guy who is very powerful, and that will be a more traditional, I guess, like fantasy type of story. So I look forward to that because again, this is the first time that I've really had a legit bad guy. So I'm looking forward to telling that story. So that will be the direction as far as what I'm doing next. So middle grade first, novella that sets up this new bad guy, and then going into the story of the next generation of consequence here, and setting up a story with primarily it'll be a back and forth female protagonist and male fighting this evil bad guy. So that will be what is on my agenda. Again, I don't know how many books that will end up being ultimately when I start to write the story. I have the idea and it'll form how it forms. But I'm looking forward to that and continuing on in this world. So yes, if you like this, like what I put out, there will be more, and I hope to keep kind of developing that. But thank you for the few folks that are on here watching. I'm sorry for the people that I lost early before I realized that maybe I was not actually recording. I'll see if I can't. One way or another, there will be a version of this that gets sent out that'll be clipped and appropriately audioed so that it makes sense.